Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bridges to the Soul. My name's Melanie Urbar. This
And
is
I'm
Tom
Tom
Eckert.
Eckert.
Yes, my teacher, my spiritual teacher. This is a podcast about walking the spiritual path in a rational world. We're referring to mainly the Western world. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about walking the talk. So not only for students, but also for teachers. This is, again, a little bit of a spicy one, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't mean to provoke here by any means, but I think that the point of this whole podcast is for us to delve into topics that can be a little bit uncomfortable, but I think that they're important to be discussed. So,
and also maybe provide some good pointers along the path.
Absolutely, to open a dialogue and to also get your feedback on this, to listen to and receive any experiences that you might have had in this topic, and to just create a open flow of communication around these things so that they become less taboo. Right, so let's get into it. So basically, Tom, we were discussing how it's very common for both, I would say, somewhat advanced students, but maybe students in the beginning as well. Let's just say students in general, as well as teachers, to experience this kind of ego, spiritual ego that has you talking the talk of the spiritual path, of enlightenment, of love, of compassion, of you name it. But then when it comes down to it, not walking the walk. So not actually living and embodying the values that you are preaching or that you're claiming to live by. So I want to get into, first of all, what your experience has been with this as both a student and a teacher, and how you witness this and how you witness this come up the most.
It's a funny one because, when I really embarked on the spiritual path in a very committed way, I was young. I was less than half the age I am today. So I was 18. I started reading, like fervently, books of Osho, I remember, and meditated a lot. And at the age of 20, I joined a spiritual community with a spiritual teacher, and I was young, and today I'm happily and with a kind of little smile, I can say, young and foolish, and with a very fat ego, as befits a young guy. So I'm not judging or anything like that. And I remember, encountering all this amazing knowledge and starting to have amazing experiences in meditation and realizing there's this whole new dimension opening inside of me. And I hear all these amazing words, and I have a spiritual teacher, and I'm with a spiritual community, and like, wow, it's like, I'm so supreme and I'm so superior. It's kind of like, not like all these other unconscious, herd out there, just like followers of the norm, just like those who are not awake and don't know. It's kind of like, of course, I'm exaggerating it a bit, but it's not far from the truth. It's just, you don't say it in these words, but you think that inside. And then I remember just like the many times I came back home and just gave my parents hell. Just being this young jerk, you know what I mean? And again, I'm exaggerating. I was also always like a very sensitive guy and really meant it and everything, but there was a gap, and that gap was visible between, preaching certain teachings and certain truths, but not knowing them deep within, not embodying them in my lived experience. And I think that, many of us fall into this trap. Many of us, we fall into this trap because we want to have we want to feel that we got it. We want to have this kind of image. It's an ego booster, right? So it's like we feel like I'm on top of things. I got it all figured out. You don't. I'm gonna tell you what it's like to have.
I'm evolved. This I am so much more evolved than you are, and you understand nothing about the world. Let me show you.
Yeah,
Let me teach
let me
you.
show you. Let me teach you. Yeah, from my supreme
Especially
abode.
from my supreme knowledge of 22 years
Exactly.
on this
And
earth
2 years
surface.
of meditation, or whatever, 4 years of meditation. I think we have to be really careful with that. I mean, and again, this is an example of a young man, but I think at any stage of life, this can happen to us. And I've seen this happen with students who are 40, 50, 60 years old. I've seen that happen with teachers who are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. So it's not really, the age, it's that very strong force working inside of us that wants perhaps to live a certain self-image, that wants a certain degree of control. And again, I don't want to portray it like as some malicious force, right? It's not so much that, it's just that we're always prone to everything good inside of us can, if we're not aware, right? If we're not like very, very cautious and have a very like honest and sharp discernment, both on mind and in mind and heart, the ego can always kind of rob everything good that arises within us. Now, we might be walking a very authentic path. We might be reading amazing books that are truly and deeply touching our hearts and moving our souls. We might be really and truthfully practicing every day. And at the same time, the ego is always a presence we have to watch for. So it's like, it's there. We cannot avoid it being there. So it's not like I'm not asking or kind of like suggesting that we're here to be perfect, or that you won't have any ego kind of like showing its face. It will show its face at every stage of the path. We grow in wisdom, and as we grow in wisdom, we become faster in identifying, that's ego. I'm not letting that seed, right, grow inside of me.
Yes.
And so and that includes teachers. So also teachers, I've seen many teachers, they talk about, very impressive ideas, but when you look at their life, or when you go behind the scenes, they will often either ridicule their subject of the topic, the very topic they were just talking about before an audience of listeners, or they will live a completely different life that does not reflect that wonderful philosophical theoretical teaching they were just sharing with the audience. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I want to get into the teacher aspect of this specifically in a minute, because I think it's such a crucial one to address, because as students, we all choose specific teachers, and we're teaching them oftentimes based on what they're showing us, but we are not seeing behind the scenes. We're not there with them wherever it is that they're teaching most of the time. Most of us, especially in the Western world, we're not in the ashram. We're not in whatever community on whatever mountain or wherever it is that the person might be. We're not actually physically there. So, and even if we are, we might not be witnessing what's going on behind closed doors. Just quickly about Osho, I think I'll be posting that in the comments for below, or in the description as well. Documentary to
Wild Country.
Wild Country. Thought really good documentary, really interesting. It's only one take on the whole story, but I think it does get a little bit into this topic of how authentic is a teacher really. How much are they really embodying their teachings, and what are kind of the shadows behind that. But as a student, and I wanted to get into this thing of the ego, and this desire that we have to embody something without realizing how difficult it is to get there, to reach. And I know the concept of reaching for something in spirituality is counterintuitive, because there isn't this goal setting mentality, or ideally there shouldn't be a goal setting mentality. But I think it's very common because that is part of the ego's workings. The ego kind of, it has aspirations of its own. It wants to shine. It wants to be validated. It wants to feel that it can exist. And within that ego narrative that we have of how do we exist, under what pretense do we exist, with what face to the outside world do we exist, I think a lot of us go astray. And it becomes this practice of witnessing, oh, no, wait a minute, that's my ego. That's not truth. That's not wisdom. That's not coming from the heart. That's here. It's a construct. I think that in and of itself is something that as students, you can be working on that for a good 10, 20, 30 years sometimes, and still not be successful at it. And I wonder if that is due to the teachers you might have, and whether or not your teachers are good at spotting this within you and pointing it out, because I think we're going to have a whole other episode on this, I think, on this topic of the teacher-student relationship and how honest or how dishonest that relationship could be if the teacher can see that the student isn't ready, that the student is acting from a place of ego, is talking the talk but not walking the walk. Is the teacher the one that points it out to the student? Is that where this all begins? And if that's so, would that imply that would that by consequence mean that the teacher needs to be aware themselves of if they're walking the talk, basically? How do you see this, Tom?
Well, I think you said it very beautifully. I mean, we teach what we are. You know, that's a big thing in life. We teach what we are. We don't teach what we say. We don't teach what we speak. Just look at your kids, right? Look at our kids. Every parent knows they can say all the nice words, but if they are not love, if they are not peace, if they tell their kids, just be nice, be calm, sweetheart, it's okay, be peaceful, be whatever, yeah, okay? But they themselves are in constant war, are in constant conflict with their partner, their kids are going to pick up on reality. They're not picking up on words. Words are of minor significance, and that pertains to adults as well. We learn by example. That's the deepest teaching. That's the deepest, most impactful teaching that we have. And so a teacher ideally, a teacher, the relationship should be such that the student has enough trust in the teacher to reflect to them when needed in a loving, kind, and wise way. Sometimes not always like by, patting them on the shoulder or caressing. Sometimes it's, you need to confront, but again, not in a violent way, in a loving and firm way sometimes, but there's enough trust that the teacher is going to reflect to you, where you're at, just in order to kind of like just balance you, okay? Just a little bit. So you're in the middle path. But, and this is a big but, the teacher doesn't live in some kind of isolated existence. No. Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, this beautiful Buddhist teacher, very famous teacher, who just passed away about 2 months ago, he uses the term interbeing. We're interbeing with everything in existence. So no teacher or student are like some kind of like disconnected system. So the teacher also needs to get reflections. If the teacher always is kind of in a standalone position where they're like the supreme, court or the kind of the utmost, authority, and there's just nobody around them to just give them a reflection, that's a very, very good recipe to just start losing yourself and in a kind of ego trip or power trip. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So that the need for reflection that comes from Sangha, spiritual community, people, wise people that you trust. Okay, if you're a teacher and you're further down, the along the path, I can understand why sometimes it doesn't make much sense that very beginner students are going to try to kind of like reflect you things. Although even from them, sometimes you should always listen. I think some degree of openness is always healthy, but definitely more advanced students who already have a level of realization, you should let them reflect you from time to time. And if you don't have those, it's important you have a few good friends that are at least on your level, if not beyond your level, to always hold you accountable, to kind of like come to the point. I actually wanted to say that if you're not walking your talk as a teacher, the fruits that are gonna be the result of your teaching are gonna be the fruits of your conflicts, the root of the gap between what you teach and what you are. And that's what's gonna be visible in your students. That's exactly what they're gonna learn from you. They're gonna learn in authenticity. They're gonna learn that they can say one thing and be another thing. That's what they're gonna learn from you.
Yes. This is absolutely true. I really like this example that you brought, this analogy that you brought in the beginning with the children-parent relationship. I think this is one that I would like to, of course, cautiously and mindfully, but I would like to actually take this analogy into this session because, again, it can be applied here when a child is being taught a certain set of values by which it is to live by, and then it becomes a teenager, and then it becomes an adult, but it's witnessing at home all the time a behavior from the parents that is contradicting those teachings. The child grows up learning exactly this thing that you mentioned. They grow up learning that it's okay to be completely inauthentic, that it doesn't really matter. You don't need to embody the values as long as you project them outward and you
Exactly.
convince others and you convince and persuade others by act of illusion, by act of distraction, by act of, let's be honest here, manipulation also. If you can convince people that you're following those values, you're good. You don't need to actually put them into play, into practice. But that leads to a lacking integration of self, interestingly enough, which is what you're sort of aiming for with a spiritual practice, is to have a more integrated self. So two things I want to get into here. Number one would be, what is it about spirituality that we as humans find so appealing that we want to adopt it as our identity, that even if we're not capable of embodying it? What is it? What is it that draws us towards this as our spiritual, as our ego, as our new form of identity? Before we were the lawyer or the basketball player or the whatever, and now we are the highly enlightened and wise spiritual student, teacher, whatever it is. What is it? What is it about that, Tom?
In my understanding, the spiritual knowledge, as opposed to any other form of knowledge, has some flavor of like something ultimate. It's like a pinnacle of human life and meaning. It's not just another topic. Like, for example, I can learn to be a cook. I can learn to be a dancer, a programmer, an engineer, right? And so on. These are topics. These are skills. But there's something about the knowledge, the spiritual wisdom that it's like the ultimate dimension of human life. It's like we're touching upon like the ultimate meaning, the ultimate foundation of existence and human existence, and our like the ultimate purpose and the ultimate invitation, to find an unbreakable sense of, of well-being, of understanding, where things make sense, where division becomes unity, where we get in touch with life truly and profoundly. So that there's something very alluring to that. And I think that given, that fact that we just mentioned, many people are attracted to this on a philosophical level.
Do you think it's also an element of like worshiping? So in this sense of, if you can manage to agglomerate this kind of knowledge, this kind of metaphysical, existential, vast, as you said, kind of ultimate form of knowledge or wisdom or understanding, if you can be the one or one of the few that touches it, that comes into contact with it, and then shares it with others, is there an element there of the ego that is just seeking like a sort of worshiping for being so special that you can communicate that?
I wouldn't say that always. Again, it differs. We have to check it, per case. Some people are genuinely interested and they haven't reached, the place in their development where knowledge translates into being and into action. So there can be really a genuine interest and a very good rhetorical capacity, for example, right? So the ability to share through talking.
But the connection is missing.
The connection is missing. So I'm saying the missing connection can be a result of simple lack of development, just not any kind of like egoic intent. Simply, I've not reached that phase yet. I'm in the phase where I'm like feeding myself with new concepts, new ideas. They inspire me. Later on in my development, this incarnation or the next, they're going to slowly sprout and become states of being. There's nothing wrong with taking in new information in and of itself. So that's one case. We have to check it per case. There are cases where it's more about an ego play, right? Like I want to have an image of someone who knows. I want to be the teacher, right? That again, it's all images of power in some way or another. So we
dominion also.
Exactly. Control, power, being the one who tells, being the authority, who knows, right? The one who knows, the one who controls, the one who has the power. And this is very common. This is very common. I mean, you see it, you don't have to go so far as to, search for like spiritual teachers or students. You can see it with people who like just think they know what's going on in the world. They pride themselves by knowing, no, I know everything about politics. I'm going to tell you, what's going on here, So this pride, we can see it like in different places. It's just like people who have that kind of spiritual pride, it's like ingrained and inherent in that spiritual field is that you feel, I now have the ultimate knowledge.
Right. But so the question that comes up for me is, what is it if we are students and teachers that are they're talking the talk, they're reading, they're sitting in their meditation, they're doing their practices, they are following teachings, because every teacher is also following the teachings that they are passing on then to some extent, right? So everyone's in that developmental stage, but then it doesn't translate into walking the walk. what happens? Where does that disconnect happen, Tom? Where do you think it comes from? What stands in the way of translating the knowledge you're absorbing and letting it permeate you and letting it change you from the inside outward so that you can embody? So what happens? Why is that disconnect there?
It's a great question. I think it's multi-layered. I think some teachers I think for some people it's due to, bluntly put, or, lack of intelligence, lack of sufficient intelligence. So I think that by speaking or by knowing something intellectually, I know it. And so I don't have enough intelligence to realize that the intellectual knowing doesn't mean I know it. It's not.
Yes, let's clarify. Let's clarify. By intelligence, you do not mean the capacity, the intellectual capacity to receive and store information.
No.
Within the brain. By intelligence, we are referring here specifically to the capacity to translate that information.
Yes, and it's something much more all-encompassing. Intelligence is much more all-encompassing. It's not only, intellect limited, not at all. Intellect is just like a small faculty in intelligence. And so intelligence or wisdom, it's like we realize that we have acquired certain information, but that information needs to be translated into action and being. Some people don't have that kind of like understanding. The clarity is not there. And that can be one reason. Another reason can be that there's an unwillingness to face blind spots. So for example, I don't want to see that I'm forceful. Okay. And I talk about compassion, and it all sounds nice, but my life is very, I'm cutting, I'm impatient, I'm aggressive in my ways, but I don't want to admit it. So I don't want to admit my own shadows. I don't want to look at my own blind spots. I don't want to have, as we said earlier, like I don't have people around me, like some kind of wise tribe that tells me, listen, Tom, listen, Mel, check yourself. Like you're off there.
Yeah.
And so if I don't want to look at myself, that's where a gap starts to open. Right. So and so I'm going to say like a third reason, which is like just like a continuation of the second, which is like some people just want control. So the second reason I've given here, the second point is more innocent in a sense. It's insincere in a sense, like because I'm not willing, to see myself, but maybe I don't want to see myself because I'm not ready. Like there's a lot of pain, maybe. You know what I mean? But a more kind of like shadowy reason for that is that I want control. Like some teachers, or I want power. I want position. Yeah.
So one might be, so just to break it down a little bit. So one might be, I have all these shadows being my favorite topic. So I have all these shadows, but I somehow have failed to actually witness the shadows as being present at all. I'm not aware of the shadows. And then, so it's almost like a little bit more innocent. I'm just not aware of the shadows. But then there is this kind of even deeper layer of, there are the shadows. I'm not aware of the shadows, or I might be aware of the shadows. And I think what's worse is I'm aware of the shadows. And the biggest one of those shadows is the desire to have power, is the desire to be worshipped, is the desire to be able to control the outcome of other people's lives, the outcome of other people's spiritual development. This is a level of control that we're talking about here. This is a darkness of shadow that is quite prominent compared to, I don't know, I'm a little bit jealous. If we're putting it, there's no comparing here, but because shadows are just shadows, but there's a dominance, there's a prominence there of how big and how dark that shadow is. And there may or may not be an awareness of that shadow, but regardless, it's like the biggest one and it's taking over completely.
Yeah. And that happens, unfortunately.
Wow.
And sometimes the only way for that to stop is life. It is the hard way. Like if we're not willing to look at ourselves and humbly admit our mistakes, correct our ways, learn, life will come at us. Life is not going to let us off the hook. Life will come and we'll see for us coming off our throne, but in an uncomfortable way.
So like in the sense of an exposure, perhaps, for
exposure, which happens very often, like inner circles very often exposing their teacher.
Yeah.
And then there's like a fall from grace, This happens often and rightfully so.
Or even with the friends, perhaps if you're not a teacher, if you're a student, perhaps in the way of losing friends or family. Exactly. If they pointed something out to you and you refuse to accept it and you continue in your ways, losing people that are of value to you. So I'm wondering, for those people that then do fall from grace or that are exposed and that somehow life and their circumstances force them to witness this lack of alignment within themselves. How do you think they can humble themselves? Like if let's say that were to happen to me, for example, and I fall from grace after all of this, and maybe I lose friends and maybe I lose, family members and whatnot. And I'm now aware of how I have been talking the talk, but I've not been walking the walk. How do I humble myself without being smothered in a gigantic blanket of guilt and shame, which I think is possible. It is a possible side effect of once the act drops, once the shoe drops, that a lot of guilt and shame is going to come from you not being congruent. So how do you do this? How do you humble yourself?
I think that guilt and shame are often a replacement for a deep, honest pain that comes from recognizing the pain that you created. Guilt and shame are still a victim consciousness. You know what I mean? It's that you feel like victimized in some way by your own doing, but actually, if you take responsibility, your heart cracks open. You're in pain because you realize you've been dishonest, and firstly dishonest towards your own soul and own heart, and kind of like leaning on something we talked about in a previous episode about like embracing things with softness and tenderness. It's not about some eternal punishment. This is just a world of retaliation and revenge. We're not living in that world. Not here.
You will not burn in the fires of hell.
No. And it's not about that. It's about learning. We are allowed to make mistakes, and people who keep an eternal grudge for either a student or a teacher or themselves are simply, they are stuck in that same egoic, pattern. They're not doing any good to themselves. So it's like, we must have a place in us that realizes that every living being has the right to make mistakes and correct them.
Yes, and that
Right?
includes ourselves.
Exactly. And so if I realized that I have been, power ridden, and I have misused my power, then it will be the most beautiful and honest thing to, to come out of hiding and admit that. For example, to do the simple thing that, by the way, many spiritual teachers fail to do, which is to say, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. To go to a student they hurt and say, my dear, I'm so sorry. Hey, I'm calling you. I would love to sit and invite you for a cup of tea because I have something important to tell you. I know how much you trusted me, and I just want to apologize that I was not sensitive enough, to see at that time, to see you. I was in my own trip and I didn't see you, and I wasn't honest to myself and therefore to you as well. And I really deeply apologize. And to say that really with heart, not to just, right? We can feel this right now as we're sharing.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
apologize. I am.
It's a heartfelt apology. You
Yes,
can actually
truly
feel
heartfelt apology. True heartfelt apology. We must agree to bear the consequences of our actions, right? And that's we make mistakes, and then we don't want to experience the ramifications, the repercussions. We want to kind of like just bypass that and continue in a kind of comfortable way, but that's not the way of life. That's an invitation for life to later on come at you like a boomerang effect and completely knock you off your tracks. So we don't want that. We want to be wiser. And it's such a beautiful thing to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I didn't see you.
Wonderful, Tom. Thank you for that. We have to, unfortunately, wrap it up a little bit because we're running close on time. But
good.
I think that's a really good note to end this on, is to, to kind of just backtrack and put it all into perspective. I think this distancing from the ego, this witnessing of when is that shadow coming up, perhaps to identify, do we have a shadow within us as people, regardless of what path we're following? Do we have a shadow within us that craves control, that craves dominion over others, that craves power? And if we have that, to illuminate it, to bring it forth so that we can witness it and be present with it and inspect what that is about, so that it doesn't take us over in this path, and a path that is meant to be truthful, that is meant to be delicate. It's meant to be of the heart. Absolutely. That it doesn't become of the mind games, of the trickery, of the inauthentic self. And to witness ourselves humbly, to keep ourselves surrounded by a sangha, group of people that can tell us, that can put us in our place, that can, tell us to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves and everyone else.
And check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's a very good one.
And everyone else.
Yeah, it's a good rhyme.
Yeah, and to humbly accept the consequences of our actions if and when the karma does come back around.
Exactly. If people are angry at you, right? If you have to go through like a period of time where you hear time and time again people's pains and cries and you bear it, bear it with honor, because you've created that. Bear it.
Yeah.
Take it on yourself. Be honest. Don't think you're
Bear
beyond
it.
it.
Yeah.
Don't think you're beyond
and find your way to redeem yourself.
Yeah, and it's okay. And here I'm going to say something in defense of those teachers, right? Like, some students will never forgive because they are stuck in that same pattern. That's also a form of power trip. Let them not forgive. Say, I bless you. I apologize. Whether you accept my apology or not, I cannot control, but I deeply apologize. If you choose to keep hating me, there's nothing I can do, but I have redeemed myself. And that's also important to do if you've done it authentically.
But yeah, thanks so much, Tom. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think we can continue this one in a different episode as well, because it's kind of like a hot topic. With so many different teachers, so many different teachings, and this, I think, this eternal quest from the student of what is real and what is not. How do I even begin to tell? And if teachers are as inauthentic as students are, how do I cipher out the honest ones? So that maybe we can go at in a different episode. For now, I wanted to thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, as always.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you also to the audience for tuning in, and please let us know how this landed for you. I know it's you're all surely having your own experiences in this regard, and I'd be really curious to hear, have you had a harmful experience with a teacher, with a spiritual teacher, or have you experienced deceit of any form of this kind? Do you experience this within yourself? Do you find yourself talking the talk and not walking the walk? And what is it for you that comes up in this regard? So let us know in the comments. You can also email us or write us in any of the social media accounts. You can find Bridges to the Soul everywhere on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook. More coming soon. Yeah. Tom, you can find Tom as well separately and myself separately. We'll be tagging everything below. And yeah, be sure to tune in to the next one. Let us know how this went for you. And thank you so much for tuning in and for investigating what it means to walk a spiritual path in a rational world.
Yes, thank you, Mel, for guiding us so beautifully and intelligently and in such an engaging way. Fantastic.
You make me blush. My pleasure.
I love it.
I will see you all next time.
See you. Bye. Oh man, there was another point I wanted to say that was really, really important. What was it? What was it, Mel?
I can't read your mind yet.
Come on.
Give me some time.
We're supposed to have superpowers. Come on, we're spiritual people.
Unagi. Exactly. How are we not telepathically managing this conversation?
I don't understand. Aren't you supposed to see my aura and everything in it?
Yeah. Well, I'm not on my top game today. What can I say? It must be all the computer fuzzies.
Give me a second. No, it was really a good point to close on. Just give me a second. My brain sometimes can be very tricky.
Yeah, perhaps on the concept of humility, of humbling yourself.
It was something along these lines. I just somehow it's not coming. Darn it.
Well, I think,
darn it. It is what it is. Life doesn't want it to come through.
Well, let's say it's just not, apparently doesn't need to come through in this episode. Apparently maybe in the next one.
Apparently